But anyway, so going to the second part of Mauricio Suleiman's statement, right? And let's recap. Basically saying that the winner of the trilogy fight has to face the WBC mandatory, which is Dillian Whyte. And you know, it's funny, and one of the reasons why I have to address this today. Most fight fans, they look at this and they say, oh, well, he has to do it, right? It's his mandatory, right? No. Tyson Fury nor Deontay Wilder has to do any of this. It's just a sanctioning body. The Gypsy King, this is a gentleman. Let's say Tyson Fury wins the trilogy fight, right? Does anyone really expect the Gypsy King to be in accordance to the bylaws of the WBC? He's already the man in the heavyweight division, whether or not, and it's regardless whether or not he's wearing the WBC heavyweight title. With or without that belt, he's still the consensus best man of the heavyweight division. He is the man to beat. Is he going to do it? If he wins, and if people still want to see unification, this is where fans always get it wrong. They always think that the WBC is in charge, or the promoters are in charge, or the fighters are in charge. Guys, the fans are the real bosses of the sport. The promoters know this. The fighters know this. The sanctioning organizations know this. Whatever the fans want to see, the promoters and the fighters must do, or else the fans are going to be pissed off and they won't support it. The fans always have the final say, and the fans are the real bosses of the sport. When are you guys going to realize this? So if still the most demanded, lucrative fight in boxing is the winner of this trilogy fight versus Anthony Joshua, if that's still the biggest money fight in boxing next year, do you really think Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder is going to say, hey, Anthony Joshua, you're going to have to wait? We have to fight this mandatory opponent. No! They're not going to do that. The WBC is just doing this to appease the fans or their critics and appease Dillian Whyte and Eddie Hearn. But the reality is what's going to happen, and I'll tell you what's going to happen, guys, how this is going to play out. If Tyson Fury wins this fight, what they're going to say is, okay, well, what we're going to do is give you the same distinction that we gave Vasyl Lomachenko and Saul Canelo Alvarez. We are going to elevate your status to be franchise champion. And we're going to elevate Dillian Whyte to be the WBC champion of the heavyweight division. Guys, that's what's going to end up happening. There's no way in Hades that either Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder is going to pass up making the biggest purse of their entire career by fulfilling a BS mandatory challenge from Dillian Whyte in the WBC. That's not going to happen, guys. The only way that happens is if every single fan does an about-face and demands to see Dillian Whyte versus the eventual winner. Because, once again, guys, the fans, when they create a demand for something and it becomes the biggest anticipated and clamored fight, that's what happens. The fans are the real bosses of the sport, guys. Why don't you guys realize that? That's what I don't understand. It's like fans, it's like they just like to bellyache for no reason. You'll always hear fans and guys like Teddy Atlas, guys who don't get it. You'll always hear them bellyache about, oh, you know what, we don't have a set schedule. We don't ever get the fights that we want. Poppycock. There's a reason why everyone's talking about unification. And there's a reason why the promoters involved, Frank Warren, Bob Arum, right? Al Heyman, There's a reason why everyone is talking about unification, already negotiating, because that's the fight that the fans want to see. And if they don't get it, if fans don't get it, well, guess what? They're not going to support the other fights. That's just the way it is, guys. If fans don't get the matchups they want to see, guess what? They don't purchase it, they don't buy tickets, and you see the ratings will reflect exactly what the fans want or don't want. Guys, the fans are the real bosses of the sport. Oh, boy. So what's going to happen? Yep. You're going to see the winner of the trilogy fight be elevated to the WBC franchise champion. And again, that's the WBC solution. And why? Well, because they know that the WBC title and the brand is worth a lot more if it's around the waist of the biggest earner, which is currently either Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua. That's the biggest fight you can make in boxing. A unification bout for all the marbles. The WBC would be foolish. What's more, guys? What's worth more? The purse of the eventual winner and the guy who's going to be facing Anthony Joshua in the biggest money fight in boxing? 3% of that guy's purse? Or 3% of Dillian Whyte's purse? What's worth more, guys? These sanctioning organizations are all about the money. You know, and critics would like to argue, well, why don't we respect the sanctioning organizations, the pecking order, the rankings? Because have you seen the rankings, guys? Guys, let's take a look at the WBA. They're currently in the process of trying to make for December 3rd Andy Ruiz Jr. versus Manuel Char. How on earth is Manuel Char the regular WBA heavyweight champion? He hasn't fought in 3 years. He hasn't fought since 2017. That's why, guys, because they make these ridiculous rankings that don't make any sense. So do you really think the fans are going to pay any attention to that rubbish? Do you think the fighters and the promoters are going to pay any attention to that rubbish? Let me give you an example of how corrupt the sanctioning bodies are and why no one should pay them any attention. Do you guys realize, and I learned this by working with the late, great Emmanuel Stewart, God rest his soul. He told me, he goes, Joseph, do you know how easy it is to get one of my fighters ranked with WBO and Paco Vericel? All I have to do is call him up and tell him, hey, pay attention to this fighter. He is going to be world champion, but he's not ranked right now. So could you do me a favor and rank him? And the very next month, he's number 5 on their rankings. That's how it works, guys. That's how it works. Guys, look at the IBF. Have you checked out any of their rankings? Look who they have as Anthony Joshua's mandatory. Old man Kubrat Pulev. Do you guys know who the number 2 is behind him? Princess Charles Martin. How on earth are those two guys number 1 and number 2? Do you know who number 3 is? My next door neighbor who just mowed my grass. That's why fans and fighters and promoters don't respect it. And Emmanuel Stewart, once again, God rest his soul, pearls of wisdom, right? He told me, look, Joseph, belts, records, and resumes are for the benefit of the fans, writers, and networks who don't quite understand yet what they're looking at in the ring. And he's right. Because the fans who actually know boxing, they know what they're looking at, and they know who the best fighters are in boxing. They don't need any ranking system to tell them who the top 5 fighters in any divisions are. They don't need any rankings to tell them who the best fighters in boxing are. So once again, guys, if you want to see a matchup, Remember, you are the real bosses of boxing. If you create that demand, it increases their market value. You beat the drum and you make enough noise, guess what? The promoters and the networks will show that fight. They will purchase that fight. Let's take a look at a fight that's currently being negotiated. Vasyl Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez. Bob Arum is all about nurturing the matchup, right? Trying to get the most amount of money. And unfortunately, Teofimo Lopez, right, created and just bumped himself way up the ladder, immediately creating a massive global demand to see him in the ring with Vasyl Lomachenko. How did he do this? By getting in the ring and putting forth an outstanding head-turning performance and winning the IBF lightweight title from Richard Comey. All of a sudden, he was the toast of boxing. After that shocking, spectacular second-round knockout of Richard Comey, what did every fan say? We have to see that fight. We have to see Teofimo Lopez take on Vasyl Lomachenko, the number one pound-for-pound guy on most boxing writers' lists. Guys, the fans are the real bosses of boxing. Promoters know this. Fighters know this. Networks know this. It reflects in the ratings. It reflects in the pay-per-view numbers. The fans are the real bosses of boxing. Don't forget it, guys. So if you want to support a certain fighter, if you want to see a specific matchup, you start making noise on every forum, Twitter, Facebook, forums, whatever your medium of choice is, and you keep on cranking out that campaign.